Hello, everyone. Welcome to SeniorOpedia, the everything how-to guide for seniors and caregivers. I'm Vera Falawala, your host for today's episode. And today we have with us Heather Johnson of HouseLife Services. Heather, welcome.
Thank you, Gaurav. Thanks for having me.
So, Heather, what is HouseLife Services? Please tell us.
HouseLife Services is now going into our 11th year of business, and we offer our clients, whether they be realtors, homeowners, children dealing with their parents' estate, young families who just have too much on their plate. We help them ready their home for sale, and anything that falls under that umbrella, we offer that service. So that's everything from the initial consultation to figuring out a way they can dispose of their contents, staging their home, repairs and refreshes so they can get top dollar for their home, and then the eventual packing and moving management once they've sold their home.
Excellent. It sounds like a wide variety of services you offer.
It is. It's a solution that we slowly crawled into. We crawled before we ran. We initially offered only the decluttering and depersonalizing, eventually expanded into the staging with our own inventory and rental inventory. And we eventually learned a little bit about content auction from somebody we both know. And that was another service we offered. And we have our own repair and refresh crew that oversees the red flags, the things that really should and actually must be done before you put a for sale sign on your front lawn.
Well, that's something definitely we're going to want to talk about because our audience is going to need to know that. But you mentioned you started off with sort of decluttering. Can you explain what that is and the difference between that and staging?
Yes. Decluttering is not just about people who have a lot of stuff. It's also a lot about how personalized a home becomes as we live in it. So you'll have various pictures of your grandchildren, possibly some degrees that are framed up in your office. There may be some awards, some sports awards, trophies with names on them. That is more what we mean by decluttering. It's actually more depersonalizing the home. So there's nothing specific to ethnicity, religion, your travels, your personal life, and also your private life. I mean by decluttering, it's actually more depersonalizing. Now, there is decluttering. There is decluttering because we do gather a lot of stuff over our experiences of living in our homes. And that obviously has to be dealt with. We don't want a lot of boxes lying around or a lot of stuff that is sitting pushed into a room that's now become the junk room or the junk drawer. That needs to be dealt with as well, but it's more about the depersonalizing of the home.
Okay. And where does that fall into why depersonalize, basically?
The reason you want to depersonalize your home is simple. You're no longer selling your home. You are selling the next person's future home. So you want to depersonalize it so whoever walks into your home, whether it's a developer or whether it's a young family or it's parents looking for a home where they're helping their children, you want them to be able to envision it as their home. So they don't really care about your travels and your grandchildren. They want to be able to envision their stuff in your home. That's why we depersonalize. You depersonalize to make them feel when they're walking in, they can see themselves living in this home, their future home, not your past home.
Okay, so that's the depersonalizing. Of course, decluttering is you don't have to be selling the home to be decluttering. You just need to organize it a bit and make some space.
Yeah, the best example I give people about decluttering is imagine that your kitchen and your bathrooms need to look as if you never used them. That's what decluttering is from a staging perspective, meaning that we don't want a toaster with crumbs on the top sitting on a kitchen counter. We don't want your toothpaste sitting on top of the vanity. We don't want your hair conditioner or shampoo sitting on a shelf in the shower. That is the decluttering part of staging. The bigger part of that is if you have a lot of stuff that's deterring from how you define a room, that needs to be dealt with too. For instance, we don't want a bedroom, primary bedroom, to become a primary bedroom / nursery / home office. It should only be a primary bedroom. Otherwise, it's sending a message that there's not enough space in this home. That's what we mean by decluttering from a staging perspective.
So it's a bit of a psychological impact.
Absolutely. It's when the future homeowner walks into your home, they can see it not only as their home, but they can have an emotional connection to the home. and each area in the home is defined. So they don't really have to think about, well, what would I do with this space? Why aren't they using this space? You want them to walk in and see this as their absolute ideal situation, their perfect home. But if not, you want them to at least envision it as their potential future home. And the ideal is that you have several people walking in with that same feeling.
Okay. So this is really just for the purpose of selling the home. That's where the staging is coming in. Decluttering can happen at any time if required.
Absolutely.
Depersonalizing is kind of a precursor to the staging. And that's to kind of make it look open. I know that,
Correct.
when you walk into a room and it's just packed full of stuff, you kind of get this overwhelming feeling. But
That's
once
correct.
everything cleared out and opened up, it creates a certain level of openness in one's mind that allow you to envision the possibilities of that.
That's correct. Yes, that's right. I mean, I think that you and I had chats in the past that what we find with staging is that some people make the mistake of thinking that staging is decorating. Decorating is not staging. Staging is not about your personal tastes, your personal trips that you want to capture in framed photos on the wall, your history with your children. That is not staging. That is decorating a home to your personal taste. Staging is about marketing the home to appeal to the broadest buyer possible. So you really have to be in tune with what the current climate is in the marketplace, what the realtor's marketing direction will be, and you really need to understand the demographic of who it is that they feel will most likely buy that home. That's what staging is. We are building a marketing plan with the staging as much as the realtor is building a marketing plan with their sales tools. And they have to marry up. So I wouldn't put, for instance, a home office in what is clearly a condo that's been designed for retirement purposes. There may be an alcove that's dedicated to a little secretary desk, but we wouldn't dedicate an entire room to a home office. Whereas in a demographic where it was young professionals that were working either full-time or part-time from home, creating a home office is essential. We would have to carve out a space to provide a proper home office. That's what staging is. It's not about the pretty things that define your past. It's about the neutralizing that will appeal to their future.
So what I'm hearing is that even in terms of interior decorating and staging, they're two totally different stages of one's life.
Yes.
Where, let's say, for example, we have bought this home and now we want to hire an interior decorator to help us decorate it to our tastes and
Correct.
to what's fitting to us. But staging is about when I'm about to leave the home, then we want to set it up for marketing success, whereby
That's right.
people, when they come in, they can look at it and go, oh, wow, this, I can see myself living here.
Exactly. Now, that's not to say that we can't use a good deal of the homeowner's items, whether it's repurposing furniture, repurposing decorative items, repurposing artwork. There is an opportunity to reuse the homeowner's items. And that's a bit of a slippery slope that we find ourselves in, especially when we work with our seniors who are living with a fixed income and they want to be extremely cost effective with any choices they make. They want to make sure they see the return on their investment. We will, unlike a lot of stagers that we've seen in the course of our dealings with realtors and with homeowners, we often will, for instance, here's a good example, we will repurpose a dining room table, but we might bring in all new dining room chairs. We could, for instance, repurpose a perfectly lovely leather sofa, but we will remove the leather love seat and matching overstuffed chair because it's just too much for that room, and bring in instead 2 accent chairs and maybe a smaller coffee table and a lighter, brighter area rug to completely change the feel of that particular leather sofa. It's extremely doable, and it's something that I feel they should be offering that, especially when there are very workable items within the home. Another example is a bed. If it has a brass headboard that's maybe dated, they can be removed and they can be tucked away. And you can bring in either another headboard or there may not be a need for a headboard. That's the other side of staging that often gets overlooked. There's ample opportunity in most cases to utilize existing furnishings and decorative items.
Okay, so when you're bringing in complementary items, I guess that's being rented
That's
by the
correct.
homeowner or the agent. And so you're coming in there and you're saying, okay, we're going to replace this, we're going to replace this, we're going to keep this and keep that. And so there's a cost associated with doing that.
That's
So
right.
do you have an entire warehouse of things then that you can provide sort of on a moment's notice or go out and buy from HomeSense or whatever?
We don't do that. That's a no-no because often those things, they get returned. And I think I don't really support that way of staging. We have a combination of our own inventory, and our own inventory, it consists of tabletop decor, artwork, bedding, throws, books. That's our own inventory. Our own inventory is something that we warehouse ourselves. Now, if we're being introduced to, say, a completely empty space, we do have a partnership with a furniture warehouse that offers their furniture as rental pieces to us, and it's a flow through for us. It's not an upcharge. It goes through our company and it's used by the home or the realtor who's utilizing it for staging purposes. We are not a furniture company, and it's imperative that our furniture stays up to date, that it's current. And for us to warehouse that would be a completely different business model. But we do have our own inventory where we keep very up to date artwork, but we also have artwork that is more suitable to, say, an older home. And we also have, this is a little example I like to give. We don't like every single home to be staged the same way. You wouldn't stage a home with a kitchen that maybe dates back to the mid 70s the same way you would stage a kitchen that has been renovated in, say, the 2000s. The 2000s, you typically always see the standard 3 San Pellegrino bottles. Whereas if we're going into a kitchen that was maybe renovated in the 70s, we would bring in instead 4 mason jars filled with lentils, coffee beans, maybe some pasta. So we are staging the home, but we're also trying to play to the home's own uniqueness. So that's our inventory. Our inventory is actually very broad. We have inventory that has historical pieces that we can utilize when staging a kitchen, right up to the typical San Pellegrino bottles with the stacked cookbooks and the layered chopping boards. That's the thing about staging that I feel should be addressed, because a lot of things I just mentioned, you can find right in the homeowner's home. But we do have it and we can bring it in at the drop of a dime. If we do need to rent from the warehouse, we need a little bit more time up front to get set.
How do you stay on top of all the different trends? It sounds like you have to have this vast assortment of things.
Well, funny enough, one of the ways I stay on top of the trends is through my consultations, because I see such a wide variety of homes throughout my consultations. And I will see anything from an $18 million home in Rosedale to a $350,000 condo in downtown Toronto. That is part of what keeps me on top of things, because I get to see the trends from every different perspective. I also am an avid Googler. I'm constantly on sites that show current trends. And I also do some research when I want to play to a home's charm. As I said, if it's a home that was built, say, in the 1950s, we may get out some of our old mid-century modern pieces and use those when staging. So that's all part and parcel. It's Googling. It's really taking notice of what people are doing when I do my own surveys. I'm not really a magazine person anymore. I'm more of an online person. And I do take part in quite a few trade shows. And also through those trade shows, I get to meet other people in the industry. And that is a wealth of information for us.
Interesting, which you, of course, bring all the way through to the customer. We cater to seniors and we have a find a realtor program. So I'm in constant communication with a lot of different realtors. And I know that when they're filling in their profile on our website, they're often adding that we'll pay for staging as part of their value-added services. Now, I don't think everybody does that, but what's your experience? Do realtors pay for this primarily, or do they bring you in and you build a homeowner? How does that all work?
There are that we've seen this managed by various realtors. Some realtors will offer staging included in their listing agreement with the homeowner. That's pretty straightforward. But behind the scenes, the realtor may have had a private discussion with us about what their budget is, what their marketing goal is, and we will be respectful of that. Oftentimes, if there is a budget that the realtor is working to, they will communicate that to the homeowner, that they will pay up to a certain amount, but the homeowner is responsible for the balance. And then it becomes a discussion of how much is needed to really get this home ready for market. Then there's the option where a homeowner may pay completely for it because they have an extremely vested interest in making sure this house sells, gets top dollar, and they will foot the bill. But there are two other options. There is an option where a realtor may offer to post sale of home pay for the staging. So if they continue on with the listing to the point of a successful sale, when the home is closed, some realtors will then reimburse the homeowner for the cost of the staging, and that is set out in their initial agreement. And the other option is that they have a sliding scale where, depending on the listing value of the home, they may have a budget that goes up or down depending on the list price of the home. So a $350,000 condo would have a significantly different budget than an $18 million home. That is another option we have seen where they'll have a bit of a sliding scale of what percentage of the listing price they're willing to invest in the staging upfront, and the realtor would foot the bill. So there's a variety of solutions that we've seen. Most often is that the realtor will foot some, if not all, of the bill. And if not, they will have an agreement in place where they will repay some or all of it at closing.
Can you walk us through the steps you take? So first you get engaged by whether it's the homeowner or the realtor. Now you walk in to start doing your initial walkthrough. From there, can you walk us through the process that you go through where you see your vision and how you see things coming together all the way through to the end of that process?
Sure. Depending on the footprint, our consultations are free. Now, that's not always the case in staging. Some people do have an upfront consultation free, but for us, we go in and we offer our services free of charge, depending on the geography. I mean, if we're traveling to Aurelia, it would be very different than if we're traveling to North Toronto, because our primary footprint is West Toronto through to Durham. But that's beside the point. When we walk into a home, the very first thing that you have to do is establish the objectives. The objectives include timeline, budget, and then, of course, what we're facing in the home. A hoarder's home is extremely different than a very beautiful contemporary designed home. What we explain to them is that we are fully bonded and insured, and a stager and their staff, in my opinion, should be always fully bonded and insured. And then we start walking through the home. From that, we are assessing what can be kept and repurposed for staging and what we would like to have removed or packed away or possibly taken away for donation or set aside for a future content auction. We explain to them that donation and disposal of items is done at the get-go if that's what they want. We would bring in bins, we would bring in our trucks for the removal of donations and the removal of disposal items. But if they do have significant contents that they don't need for their move, there is the opportunity that we step them through a content auction. We have to explain that at the get-go because a lot of people start giving away their things the second that they want to sell their home. And we have to say stop, because not only can it be repurposed, but there may be something that could be auctioned and put back into either the family estate or to be put back into the bank account to offset the cost of staging or whatever else they need to do to the home to ready it for sale. But as we're going from room to room, we're identifying two things: what goes and what stays. And then from that, we're also assessing what needs to be brought in to complete the picture. There's one other side to this, though. If the homeowner is planning to move out and not live in the home, in fact, they may be moving into a retirement community or moving in with their children, and that's particularly the case with our senior community, they will be taking things with them. And a lot of them don't want to be there during the selling process. So we have to establish, are we removing things? And if so, what? So now we have three things we're looking at. What will they be taking with them? What do we not want to use for staging that we may be able to donate, dispose of, or set aside for future auction? And what will we be keeping for staging? We may have to fill in the gaps should they be removing certain things to their new residence, if it's a retirement community or, as I said, living with their children. So if they want to take their bedroom set and their favorite sofa, those items will have to be put back into the home for staging purposes. So it's a complete and comprehensive report on what we would like to keep, what we would like to remove, and what we need to bring in to complete the overall picture to ready the home for sale. And then we provide that back to the family with pictures of everything we would like to rent, so they have an appreciation for our vision And we first usually run it by the realtor to make sure it's aligned with their marketing strategy. And that's when we start the ball rolling from that point forward.
One of the biggest questions we get asked when we're doing our estate sales for clients is, should we sell everything first,
That's
clear out the whole place, then get some rental items for staging, or should we declutter first, get all the staging done, sell the house, and then after we've got an offer, then do the estate sale to sell as much as possible? What do you think?
My personal opinion is that selling of the house is always the number one priority in most cases, in most jobs that we work on. So if that's the case, we have to be extremely cognizant of the items that we're keeping for staging. In most cases are the very items that would be sold at content auction. And can we establish temporary storage, ideally somewhere in the home, whether it be the garage or an unfinished room in the basement, so that we're again looking at cost effectiveness, so we don't have to bring in a portable storage unit or haul things off to self-storage for temporary storage. If the number one goal is to sell that house, nothing should get in the way of that particular goal. So our recommendation is almost always, the minute you have received a firm offer, that's when we turn on the setup for content auction. That's when we start going in and denoting the various auction lots, doing the photography, the cataloging, and the uploading. The only thing that may inhibit that is if it's a short close. Unfortunately, you don't know until you get the firm offer what the close will be, because even though the homeowner may ask for a 60 or 90 day, the buyer may insist on a 30-day. That may be somewhat inhibitive to having an auction that has sufficient time to do the prep and run the auction. So you really have to explain that to the homeowner, that there is a slight chance that if we do plan for an auction, it could somewhat be deterred if we have a very short close. Otherwise, our experience has been after you have a firm offer, that's when you do your content sale. We also hope that we're in there early enough in the survey process that they haven't started to donate all these wonderful things that we know from experience are very auctionable. And you and I both know that mid-century modern is extremely hot right now. And so many people have dropped off these beautiful Pyrex casserole dishes at the local Salvation Army, which is heartbreaking because those are the very things that would do quite well in a content auction. So you really hope that you get in there early enough to curtail the disposing and purging without some direction as to what they should be purging and donating.
Well, in terms of value, we see that all the time as well. The same thing that you just talked about, we see that on a regular basis. And I guess because people really don't know what the value of their items are. They just think that from their standpoint, it's not valuable. So everybody's going to think of it the same way.
It's been sitting in my cupboard for the last 30 years collecting dust. Who's going to want it? A lot of people. Yeah.
And they don't realize it, right?
No,
So
don't realize that. No.
let's
Sorry.
try to sell whatever we can, get you some cash for it. And then you can always dispose of it or donate it, whatever, after we've tried to get you some cash.
Absolutely. And I mean, because the way we approach staging is very organic, we have our handyman crew on site because they also serve as our heavy lifters. For example, if there's a sectional rug in the rec room that would be better used in the living room, they're not only repairing mold and water damage, because those are two red flags that must be dealt with, but while they're waiting for paint to dry, they are also put into service helping us with the relocating and repurposing of furniture. So we have a very good idea of, as we're organically going through the home, what should be kept for auction. So if we're clearing out kitchen cupboards, we're clearing out the dry goods, expired food items, perishables, to create storage room in those cupboards for the very things that we would like to tuck away for future auction, but not necessarily stage with. It's a treasure trove, and a lot of people don't understand that. The secret upside of an auction that people often don't understand, but it's extremely valuable to them. An auction isn't just the value of what you're getting from the bidder. It's also the labor and transportation that they're providing. these items have to be removed from the home for the new owner at some point. Why not have somebody pay you when they bid on the object to then bring in their own labor and their own transportation to remove it? That's the hidden value of the content auction.
Even if it's a small amount where you're getting some cash, but somebody else is paid for the removal of the item because they bought it,
Right.
then you're overall far better off.
And often we find these very things that the homeowner didn't think would have any value are amazing decorating items that we can use in staging because the future buyer is now maybe looking at a home that has some mid-century modern accents to it. So why not play up on it? Why not bring out a beautiful old console stereo set and set it up as a martini bar? Why not? And let's get out that old martini set and ice bucket. Why not utilize them when we're staging the home? Because it'll only add to the character of the home. So you're actually downplaying maybe some of the blemishes in the home by playing up on the quirkiness of the era that the home was built in.
Very good points. And sometimes the buyers actually will also fall in love with those items.
All the time.
So again, saving you from having to remove it, especially
all the
larger.
time. All the time. I just did a little semi-detached home in Etobicoke, and we brought in these 2 slipper chairs, just 2 little slipper armless chairs for her living room, and a beautiful boucle rug. And she absolutely fell in love with them, and they were purchased to go in her next home. Now, that was just staging items, but we also, on her kitchen counter, pulled out a bunch of her own wooden chopping blocks that she even known that she owned. And the new owner who had bought it had asked if she would leave them. It was a simple little item, but it made it that much more desirable to the future buyer. In this case, the actual buyer.
Sure. Is staging more important in a slow market or a hot market?
There's 2 sides of the coin. In a hot market, you've got lots of competition, so you want your home to stand out. In a slow market, you hardly have any competition, so you really want your home to stand out. All I can say to that one is that a home that has been staged intelligently will be remembered. And that is key, whether it's a hot market or whether it's a slow market. You want your home to be remembered because so many people are now shopping online and they're just swiping through like a dating site, swipe left, swipe right. You want your home to stand. And in order to make your home stand out, you must look at how it's going to present itself. And in my opinion, a staged home creates an emotional attachment. It defines the home better and it markets the home better. We usually use strategic things like pops of color. For instance, we might put a bowl of red pomegranates in the middle of a dining room table, because people will remember that home is the home with the red pomegranate. Or we may have a whimsical print in a child's bedroom of a pretty cute pink pig, and they will remember that house with the cute pink pig. So in my mind, staging never really has a season. It's a necessity if you really want your home to stand out and sell successfully.
I've sold several homes myself, and every time there's an open house and you get a couple that's walking in, and I know exactly who's going to put an offer and who's going to probably be the ultimate buyer. I look at the wife's eyes. They walk in. If they start to grow and expand, then I say that she's got the look. And once I know that somebody's got the look, almost 99.9% of the time, they're the ones who end up buying the place. So I can see where if the place is well staged, that it's a much higher likelihood that she's going to have that look.
They mean emotional connection. That's right. And you know, the thing I find funny is that a home, when staged, is an impossible thing to aspire to. You're walking into basically a magazine shoot. But people don't care. They really believe that when they walk in, that's how they're going to live their life, because that's how they would like to live their life. But we all know the minute you move in there, there's going to be crumbs on the kitchen counter. There's going to be spit marks on the mirror in the bathroom. Beds are going to be hastily made, if made at all. But they're walking into something they want to aspire to. It's basically a falsehood that they're hoping. They're not just buying that home because it looks great. They're buying that home because that's the lifestyle they're aspiring to.
As you know, SeniorOpedia is all about seniors and caregivers. Do you find that there's a difference in having to stage a senior's home who's lived there for 30, 40, 50 years or more versus a regular family home?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, more than 60% of the homes that we work on are either seniors who are downsizing or children who are managing their parents' estates. So it's far more emotional because you're seeing these items that you saved for and waited for over years, potentially being taken off for donation or sold at auction for pennies on the dollar. So you have to be extremely respectful of that process. And we don't walk into a home willy-nilly saying, oh, all this has to go because it's not suitable. You have to be extremely respectful of the fact that this is a home that hasn't just been lived in for 40 years, and it's filled with 40 years of much loved stuff that all brings wonderful memories, whether it's for the senior or for the children selling the parents' estate home. So in those cases, we do really lean heavily on the realtor's marketing direction. How far do we want to go with this staging? And will they be living in the home during the selling process? Because if they are living in the home during the selling process, we do tend to lean more on what is non-negotiable. What can't we remove from your home? It's absolutely fine. If you want your lazy boy left dead center in the middle of the living room because that gives you the greatest deal of comfort, we will work around it. And we will do it respectfully, and we will do it to the very best of our ability. However, if they're not living in the home during the selling process, we can be a little more aggressive with how we would stage the home. And unfortunately, that's usually the better option because we can give it our very best shot at bringing the home to market to appeal to the broadest buyer. But we do usually have consistency of team, which means that it's very different when you're with a young family that's got kids in hockey and ballet or whatever, and they just want to get the house on the market and they don't have the time. They just want it done. With a senior situation, we tend to bring in the same team from start to finish because there's that consistency of relationship that is key. So if I go in to do the consultation with my partner, it will either be my partner or me that takes the lead on that job from start to finish. So they know, we know their vision, their wants, their must-haves, and that we will make sure that those things are worked into the final staging overview. I'm going to give an example. They had the piano in the kitchen. Why did they have the piano in the kitchen? It was the warmest room in the house. It was where they hung out the most, and they did not want that piano removed from the kitchen because that's where they played it, because that's where they were warmest. And so we worked around it. Thankfully, it was a big enough kitchen, but we worked around it, and that piano stayed in that kitchen. Would we have wanted it in there? No. We would have preferred to take that piano, move it into another room or completely remove it and have an eat-in kitchen, which is far more marketable. But in this case, it just didn't work. So you have to be very conscientious of where they're at in their life, and you have to be very respectful of that. And we are, because we deal with it all the time.
In that example, did the house actually sell?
It absolutely did. Every single other room in the house was set up from a marketing standpoint. And any realtor that's worth their salt can explain away a piano in a kitchen if it's an elder home. It's rocket science.
Again, at the end of the day, the entire purpose of staging is for marketing. It's to try to generate more money for the selling price or for the home price, or do you find that it's more so a matter of selling faster or both?
It's both. It's always both. There's not one for sale sign out there that doesn't want to sell quickly and over ask. That is the ideal, that you want to sell quickly with multiple offers and over ask. That is the sweet spot for any realtor or anyone selling their home. Staging is all part of that. Now, the other thing we didn't touch on is there's red flags too. We would rather see people spend less on staging and more on repairing red flags because red
Mm.
flags are what we call negotiables for future owners. So if there's evidence of water damage that's been remediated, but they never took the time to repaint the ceiling, or when pulling stuff out of a storage room in the basement, you discover mold, that needs to be dealt with. That is your priority before you start to stage, because anytime there's mold, anytime there's evidence of water damage, anytime there's evidence of a toilet that's not properly flushing, these need to be dealt with before you get into the staging, because those are what we call red flags. And rather than repaint the house to make it beautiful for staging, make sure the house is solid and you're not going to be blindsided with these huge negotiables where that's going to impact the final sale price. So, I mean, that is just the ethical part of how we approach staging. And I wish everybody did. It's not always the case. It's a bit of a slippery slope, this industry, where people can easily be taken advantage of. But if you have somebody that is conscientious and ethical in their approach, before we get into the staging, what needs to be done to the house first? Sure, the decluttering, sure, the depersonalizing, sure, let's think about an auction. But as we're doing that, if we notice anything that's a red flag, that should be dealt with. And even if it's at the cost of cutting back on staging, it's more important. And I'm only saying that sort of as my public service announcement here, because it is kind of shooting myself in the book, but it needs to be said.
Well, and you manage a lot of that anyways, right?
We do. And that's why when you put together your comprehensive overview, we break it out into phases so they can pick and choose what the priorities are. And we actually list our phases in the priority that they should be. So you'll never see us putting staging before mold remediation. Never.
Well, there's a lot of people out there who take a look at your plan, for example, and they would say, oh, geez, the cost of doing this and this and this is so high up front. And they forget that if they don't do it, buyers are going to build all of that anyways into the price.
Absolutely. They can even retroactively bring it in. If they find this mold or evidence of this mold after they've registered their offer, they can, because if they put in their conditional upon inspection, they can then backpedal and back out by $10,000, $20,000 at that stage. And then you've lost the interest of the people, and you've also lost the momentum of the people that were excited about your house that would have possibly put in an offer. So it has to be an ethical process of what are the best steps that you should follow to that when you go to market, you are marketing something that is going to get you ideally a fast sale, multiple offers, and all over us. I think those days are kind of limited right now because it's a bit of a challenging market out there. But I think it's imperative that you're dealing with people that you trust and know what they're talking about and have a considerable amount of experience in this industry.
Well, putting a few $1,000s into negating any potential problems will probably actually yield you an extra $10,000.
Absolutely, because it's not just the mold that you're removing and remediating, it's what else is now being hidden, what else is seen. That's what starts to happen. Even if it's a tiny little patch of mold at the back of the closet in a cold spot on an outside wall, their immediate thought will be, well, how much more mold is there hidden in this house?
You don't want to create that negative impression up front because it will end up costing you in the end. So you may as well get it taken care of, invest it as opposed to expense it, and get much better result at the end of the day.
And odor. It's not just the visible things, it's the things that you can smell. We listed our townhouse and it was beautiful. The house was absolutely beautiful, but we knew that even though we'd brought in an excellent carpet cleaning company that could spot clean where there was cat urine, we could still smell it. But the realtor said, we will disclose it. It will be as is, where is, we'll disclose it. But that, as the year progressed and the air conditioning was no longer being used and now the heat's on, it became prevalent. You could just smell it the minute you walked in the door. It was well worth their while retroactively to strip out all of that carpeting and have new carpeting laid. It's just unfortunate that if they had done that at the get-go, which was our recommendation, that momentum of interest would have been at a peak versus now after the fact trying to regain the interest of people who had come and seen and could smell that smell and were coming back. You won't get those buyers back.
And the longer the house sits on the market, the more people will sit there and think, well, what's gone wrong with it? Why isn't it selling?
How many more maintenance fees have we paid in not having put that new carpeting in, which was recommended. And it was a vacant house too, because the mother had already been moved into a retirement community. So I'm sure they were depending on the sale of this townhouse to finance her living accommodations.
I've often heard about when people are staging that they should make the place look very neutral in terms of colors and things like that. Why is that?
Well, it goes back to that. You want them to be able to envision it as their own home. So if there's glaring colors like a little girl's deep purple bedroom, they may think two things. Oh, I can't envision myself here. And, I'm going to have to do work before I can even move in. So it's twofold. You want to neutralize because if you have a neutral palette, it's that much easier for a greater, broader buyer market to be able to envision it as their future home. And the other is it's in moving condition. So it's the least amount of work. And I'm not really looking at spending this much money to only have to go in and do all of this work. So you want it to look as move-in ready as possible. The other side to that, though, is that if a little girl's bedroom is painted purple and the homeowner is absolutely not willing to paint it, it's up to the stager. It's the stager's task then to make that work within the home. So you have to just play up on it where you maybe turn it into a whimsical wood nymph bedroom. And then maybe if you're lucky, one future buyer brings in their 12-year-old daughter who absolutely falls in love with it.
Heather, thank you very much for presenting here today. I'm sure it'll be a wealth of knowledge for our audience. I would like to ask one last question about the staging industry. What should people look out for when they're looking to hire a stager?
The best advice I can give is make sure that the staging plan truly reflects what is needed to market the home. Meaning you shouldn't have an overstaged home. An example of this would be it's sufficient to stage a living room with a beautiful sofa, 2 accent chairs, a coffee table, cement tables, and perhaps an area rug. You do not need then to add a bench that has a blanket thrown over it that just adds to the overall aesthetic but doesn't add to the marketing of the living room. The reason I caution that is please keep in mind that the way one can make money in staging is by the amount of items they are having you rent for the staging. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're needed, but it does drive up the cost of the physical staging and therefore make it a bigger billable for the person doing the staging. So the one coming out and saying it, be careful that there's enough or sufficient staging to market the home, not overstaging the home to drive up the bill.
Great. Thank you very much. Where can people get a hold of you if they're interested in the services that you offer?
They can get a hold of me by going through our website, which is www.HouseLife. So it's HouseLife, not wife. So HOUSEL as in lion, IFE.ca. They can phone me at 647-544-7667, or they can contact me through my email, which is simply heather@houselife.ca.
Again, thank you very much for your time today, Heather, and your advice to everyone.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
If you like this episode, then subscribe, like, share, and most importantly, register for upcoming notifications at SeniorOpedia.com.